Welcome to another episode of the Tough Stuff Podcast.
Be sure to like, love, share, or subscribe wherever you may be watching or listening, because we believe God wants to bring encouragement and hope through these stories.
What's going on, Tough Stuff?
Hey.
How you guys doing today?
Episode 10. Can you believe we did anything 10 times in a row?
I feel like we have actually accomplished something here, being that it's 10 episodes.
I mean, it's kind of a big deal, in my opinion.
It's almost becoming, to me, it hasn't even been like, and for me, I kind of always hesitate on starting things because I feel like it's hard to keep it going. But after 10 of them, I feel like this is actually like, maybe we could do this thing.
This is like a thing, and we're just getting started.
And I didn't, you were really the one that was the driving force behind getting this thing started. Maybe you're just what I needed in my life.
Hey, good thing.
But
episode 10, we're married for 10 years.
10 years.
Oh my gosh.
Significant.
That's crazy.
Significant.
Mm-hmm. Well, on today's episode, we thought it would be fitting to get into our parenting journey. Not necessarily how to parent, because I don't think we know anything in that realm. But we do have a very interesting story of how we became parents, and then also just our journey in becoming parents.
Forgot to check my hair before we got this thing started.
Well, good. You made me want to check mine.
Yours looks great.
So, when I think about our parenting, like our path to parenting, I guess, more or less, it is not a traditional story.
Yeah.
It is not a linear story.
No.
It is not it wasn't predictable for us in the moment.
It wasn't planned. Thought through, which is most things in our life.
In our life, it's true.
Or thought through.
I think about our journey of becoming parents, and I almost, you can easily get like, well, why didn't it work out easier for us? But I think that God really took us on this journey, and it built our faith along the way.
Yeah, for sure. I think even if you backtrack before, and we didn't talk about really getting into this, but if you really step it back even a step before even becoming parents, both of us had a unique, not maybe unique, but overcompensative desire to be parents.
Yes.
We both had reasonings to, it was just a very big, deep desire in our hearts to be parents.
Yes.
Myself, because of not having a father figure in my life, that being so dear to my heart to want to be a father, But then even that, you think about later on, we'll get into this adoption portion of it. But my heart to wanting to be a father to the fatherless,
Yes.
And then, just you growing up with just who you are, and your heart to want to be a mother and to want to sit with a little girl and, those kind of things, which is so almost ironic, that we had this almost a battle, which, we kind of talked about that a couple of weeks ago. Maybe it was Manda was talking about how the very thing that she had a desire in her heart to be, or she wanted to be because of her ethnicity or who she is in her tribe, was the very thing that the enemy wanted to attack.
Yes.
And I see that so often in life.
Yes.
The very plans of God that are redemptive are the very things the enemy comes against the most, or
But it's those things that produce like a really crazy God story.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's like, haha, devil, you're stupid. Which
is kind of the reason we wanted to start this whole podcast, not to glorify us by any means, but we have seemed to always have had a crazy story in most of the endeavors of our life. And maybe it is, and this is why we just want to start this podcast, to give God glory in that stories. But now, as I'm kind of questioning myself, maybe God's like, it's not really me doing this, it's just y'all doing things wrong. But he always works it out,
God always has our back. Yeah, so many of you probably do know, and if you don't, our journey to parenting included 8 years of infertility. It included infant private adoption, and then it included really, how do you explain Zayla? A miracle.
Yeah, for sure. Even the timeline, and we'll get into that too. But I just go back to even like our desire to want to be parents. 8 years of infertility, but there was 6 years of us being married and just us two, and always getting that question, when are y'all gonna have kids? Are y'all planning on having
Yes.
kids? And
Which was so painful. And I know people mean well. And I don't think there was anybody who asked us that question
No, for
that
sure.
meant ill. But when you're struggling with infertility, that is like, so many times I wanted to say, I know, like, talk to God about it. I don't know. We don't know. You're out of control.
Thinking about that is so funny to think about. I think the reason that most people say stuff like that, or they ask, hey, when are y'all going to get married? When are you going to have kids? Is because of their lack of other things to talk about. So out of their discomfort of not having something to say to you, because they do, people, I'm guilty of it too. When you run into somebody, you're like, oh, what are we going to talk about? What am I going to bring up? And you naturally bring that up. But because of their lack of desire to sit in a little bit of uncomfortableness, they make other people uncomfortable without even thinking about it.
But it's like an uncomfortable depth of like, I don't even know the word for it, because it's not like something we chose.
Yeah.
And it's not like we had any control. So like we wanted to be excited when people would ask us that question, but we didn't have the answer. And I don't know if you're like me, if I can't help somebody or answer their question or please them, I am like undone. Like it sends me. And so I think I look back on that time and I just remember, feeling hopeless, not necessarily with God per se, but I wondered for so long, like, were we ever going to have kids?
Yeah, and I think there was like little glimmers of hope here and there. And let's get this right. Like, we never like pulled out the charts and the calendars and really got to try what we never not tried for sure.
I think I was in denial. Like,
Yeah.
I think I wouldn't allow myself to accept the fact that maybe there was something wrong, So we lived for several years like this, like, lifestyle where it was like, we're not preventing, God, you're so good, you're gonna do this. And I think because of that, I never allowed myself to go into the zone of like really trying.
Yeah.
Because it was like in the back of my mind, this insecurity that something was wrong, and I didn't want to know what it was.
Yeah.
So as long as it was on God's table,
Yeah.
then it was like his problem,
Yeah,
but there
makes
were some
sense.
things I think in my heart that I had to come to terms with, like God may give us a diagnosis, not God, but there may be a diagnosis in our bodies, and we have to be okay with that, and we have to know the perspective of God with that diagnosis.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, for sure. But I think about even the fact that, before we even got married, we always talked about wanting to adopt and wanting to
It was on our
maybe
hearts.
foster.
It was on our hearts.
And then you look at it holistically, and I was thinking about this a little while ago. Like, here we are now, we have two of our own kids, and I'm like, I don't know if I would adopt now because if God called us to, of course we would. Of course I have a heart to, I'd love to, but even like from the fleshly perspective, it'd be like kind of crazy to just decide to adopt another kid right now. But
Well, I think
God
the
knew
season that we're
desire of
in
our heart. Oh, for
is
sure.
intense, yeah.
So he really did line it up perfectly. But even before we started to adopt, I remember getting into foster care classes and trying to, we did start trying to create an avenue for ourselves to become parents. And, we went through the foster care classes, and then we eventually tried to get certified as foster care parents. And do you remember that day that we had the caseworker at our house?
She was at our house.
She was at our house, and I had to run out to go.
She was interviewing me.
Yeah. She was interviewing you. I had to go run some errands to try to get my
Run some errands. I had to go to
I had
the
to
prison.
go get my rap sheet in order for us to be basically qualify. And then I remember just going to the police department and asking for my paperwork. And the guy looked at me. He's like, "Oh yeah, I'll get it for you. Just follow me here." And I followed him. And I remember hearing the first set of doors locked behind me. And then I was like, "Oh, that's a little different." I figured they could just print it out and give it to me at the front desk, you know. And then the second doors of the second gates locked behind me. I'm like, "Oh, this is not good." He's like, "You actually still have an outstanding warrant for your arrest."
Gosh. As I am literally sitting with the caseworker, like, yeah, we would be great parents.
We were having to call you like, "Babe, I think I need you to come like bail me out."
Yeah, that
while
was
you're
good.
with the lady. She's like, "I don't think y'all are ready
It's
for
not.
this yet."
She's like, it's just probably not the right time. But I believe in y'all, and and you know the
So
thing about
awesome.
us with foster care and really our heart for adoption and ministry, honestly, is we have such a heart for broken people,
Yeah.
broken kids,
Especially innocent,
broken
vulnerable.
any child that is in a broken home or a broken situation. We have always like united on this common love for them. And
think about
you know,
Derek. We tried to adopt Derek.
we've tried to adopt so many. I mean, I am the godmother of so many kids in the inner city of Baton Rouge.
Yeah, you look at our wedding. Like we had all these kids in our wedding.
We
and-
just, I think if we could, we would adopt hundreds of people,
Yeah.
kids and people. But I just think about our heart, you know, for really just the lonely or the marginalized even, and how that love birthed in us the desire to become parents, and we knew it wouldn't be in a traditional way.
Yeah.
We just didn't know that we were going to struggle with infertility. So we always wanted to adopt. We've always wanted to do foster care. We knew those things would be part of our story, but we didn't know like how the storyline would play out.
Yeah.
And I think about, you know, when God clearly spoke to us about adopting.
5 years into our marriage.
5 years
never
in.
preventing, never.
Never preventing, which is so irresponsible if you think about it. But
Hey, I loved it.
I bet you did. Well, I think about when God told us, you know, it was clear that
Yeah.
we were to adopt. Why don't you tell that story?
So I had the opportunity to go speak at a church in Mississippi, Bay St. Louis, and I ended up speaking there a good bit, but it was the first time we got to go speak there. And I remember just being blown away by the culture of the church.
Yes,
You know?
small church.
Small church. I love how different churches, you know, the Bible talks about, you know, the body of Christ, and they all have different functions. It takes all kinds. And we have a church that's a lot more outreach, serve, you know, small acts of kindness driven. Well, this church was very adoption oriented. It was like everybody in the church either had adopted kids or they had 4 foster kids.
Yes.
And I just remember like going, you know,
Everyone you met.
we go pray. They pray for us before service, and the guy would be like, "Yeah, these are my 5 foster kids." We're trying to get another one.
That guy's like, yeah, I know what guy you're talking about. He said he had 2 teenage foster sons, and then his girlfriend was fostering 2 teenage girls,
Yeah.
and so I'm like, man, they're
dynamic's
on a
there.
different level, like to
But
foster a
everyone
teenager.
either was fostering or adopting, or their lives have been touched by it at some point. And so preach a message, and then which is so funny how God uses and works things. You think this is going to be the most significant of you as you going to bless these people with a word from God. But then I remember they asked us to come pray for a guy in the congregation, 50, 60 years old, single man, who had taken in a child on his street in his neighborhood because the mother had gone to prison, and then the grandmother had the child, and the grandmother had gone to prison.
Yes.
And the little boy's name was Safari. And I remember praying for Safari and praying over this guy that was taking care of him. And just so clearly in my spirit, I felt God speak to me.
But that was crazy because we both felt that.
Yeah.
It was like...
Well, we didn't talk about it till after we kind of finished, which I was going to get into that.
I know, but looking back, it was like the first time that we had like a united, like God spoke to both of us.
At the same time.
Yeah.
And that was such confirmation, you know. But I felt like, you know, basically... You know, God said, I'm about to take you on a journey or take you on a safari in the adoption world. And, you know, I remember walking out of there. I have a very photographic memory, but I remember walking out of the doors and bringing it up to you. And you were like, I felt the exact same thing. And from there, we came home and we just knew that we had a word from God.
But we thought we thought it meant fostering.
Yeah. So we thought it meant fostering because... we were both on staff at a church, making church staff salary. And, you know, all we knew was that foster care was they basically help you provide. You know, they give you a check every month. And we knew that adoption was very, very expensive.
Which, you know, I think God speaking that word to us, it really just pushed us to be in position.
Yeah.
You know, so we didn't know what kind of journey we were about to embark on, but we knew like our focus needed to start moving towards parenting.
And it's such the irony of God that, you know, as humans, we will always seek out the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
The easiest route, adoption, foster care. You know, they give us a check. You know, maybe they can help me pay for some milk, or maybe they can help me do this
But
and that.
foster care has a lot of challenges.
Oh, for sure.
You know,
and
it's
we had gone
definitely not
to
the
those
easier
foster care classes. No, not by any means. I was just strictly thinking financially.
Yeah, you were like, we don't have $60,000.
So I remember, you know, we started to, I think we called our caseworker again, and we're like, hey, we're ready to get back in the game. You know, I have some of these charges on my record. They've kind of been in the past now are expunged and taken care of. And then I remember taking a shower one day, which God speaks to me in the shower a lot. Ironic. I don't know why that's ironic.
Yeah, why is
but
that
it's just
ironic?
different.
Weird.
But I remember him saying very clearly, and you know, these are funny because, you know, I say God speaks a lot, and you know, you hear impressions through reading the Word of God or this and that, but these were some of the most clear times where I felt like God pressed things on my spirit, and it's pretty obvious that it was him because it was none of me whenever I felt him say, no, private adoption. And our only preconceived notions of private adoption at that point was a lot of money, thousands and thousands of dollars, you know, and it really was cool though, because it was at that time in our life, which I think a lot of people, I think we talked about this too last week with Tori, you know, a lot of people's faith becomes dull because they don't put themselves or position themselves in the need for faith again.
For a miracle.
And I'm not saying we positioned ourselves by any means. It was only by the Spirit of God that he told us to seek out private adoption. But we were obedient enough to position ourselves in a place everybody wants a miracle, but nobody wants to be in position to need a miracle.
Yeah, because it's scary.
It was scary. And I remember
It's
even
scary.
the fear of the first time we were going to announce on social media private adoption, just kind of the same fear that came about when we thought about doing this podcast of like, is anybody really going to respond? Is this really going to go anywhere? Is this really going to happen or come to fruition? You know, and it was just so scary to stick it out there. Hey, we want to do this. You know, it's looking to cost $40,000 to $60,000 to $70,000. And that's more than either of us make in a year.
But I think about how, you know, so often when God puts things on your heart, it's like he's not asking us to know all the answers. And I think it feels like we should. Like, it feels as if, you know, all of a sudden God put this on our heart and we should know exactly what we're doing, when and where and how. Yeah. And that's just not the case. You know, I think God wanted us to be in position. He wanted to turn our attention towards this idea of adoption and then let himself fill out the blanks so that we knew what we were looking at, you know. Yeah. I think about
preacher alert. We're always looking for the how instead of looking for the who. Sorry, I had to. I'm putting that in my notes later on.
But I just remember that season of life. My sister was pregnant.
Yeah,
And
which even that was not easy, being that we were married before them. Not that it's a hierarchy, but you're the older sister, and then to see her get pregnant. I don't think I've ever even told you this, but my heart almost broke for you in that moment. So
I don't think I was ever jealous of her.
I was for you.
I think maybe you were more emotional about that than me. I was excited. Our families were growing,
Yeah.
My sister was having her first baby. But yeah, there is this disappointment that comes whenever it's not just that easy for you,
Yeah.
It was kind of one of those things where it was oh really, God, it's gonna be that easy for her, and for me, it's not,
Yeah.
And so, but I look back and I wouldn't change a second of our journey, but
Yeah.
I remember her being pregnant and feeling that joy of oh, if we could just start our families together, that would be amazing. We could, the kids could grow up together. They could be friends and cousins and all this stuff. And I'll never forget, we were in the waiting room at Women's Hospital.
Yeah.
Emily, my sister, was having some complications near around when she was due. And we're in the waiting room.
We'd been in the adoption process at this point.
Yeah, we did all our paperwork.
Been putting in for cases.
Which we
hoping that
probably
they would
should go
say
back and talk
yes.
about that, because that
It
was
was just
intense.
such a while. The adoption journey is just so crazy. Here you make this book of your life, basically presenting yourself, and you just hope somebody picks you, almost like creating a podcast. You just hope somebody clicks play.
Would you please press play?
But you just create this book, and you literally go through this season of they send you a case. Some have pictures, most don't. I'm a little vain. I wanted pictures. But they say basically this is the parent, this is what they've gone through, this is their history, if there is any, and would you like to be presented to this birth mother?
And you have 24
You
hours.
have 24 hours to say yes or no.
So it wasn't like you had all the time in the world to get before God and ask God, is this the one? Is this one? I remember us having to navigate that. We finally were is there peace or not? And
Yeah.
so we would say yes or no, yes or no. And there were so many cases that would pull on our hearts. And then we'd get that rejection, which
Yeah.
is an interesting dynamic when you consider infertility and then you're trying to match in the adoption process. It's like that same wound over and
Yeah.
over again, that rejection.
I remember a couple of cases we thought we had some people that spoken maybe twins over our life, and we were excited about
I have
twins.
a bone to pick about that, because people say stuff all the time, and unless you know that God said
Yeah.
that we're gonna have twins,
It can
you
be
probably
damaging.
shouldn't say.
But I remember us finally getting that
'Cause I was
case of twins.
yeah.
And we're like, this is it, And I
Yeah.
remember even going to a worship night at the church.
Yes.
And I'm thanking God the whole night for these
We
twins.
just knew it was them.
And then I think it was during the night we got an email saying that we didn't get picked, but honestly it just feels more like rejection,
Yes, we thought God had told us.
Which now I thank God that we did not
I
have
know.
twins. Could
wouldn't
you
that-
imagine?
God bless all of you
being in
people
that
with
house
twins.
in Arizona?
Oh my gosh.
So you're in the waiting room. We're waiting in the
Yes.
waiting room with Emily.
Yes, and we're sitting there, and we get a call while we're waiting to find out when she was gonna have her baby, and we get a call, and it's our adoption consultant, and she says, "I have amazing news for you, Allison. You've been you guys have been matched with a birth mom,"
Yeah.
and basically all that means is that there's a woman who's pregnant who has decided that our book is peaceful, cool, whatever enough.
She liked something about it enough.
Yeah, there's something about us that she liked, and
Yeah.
she picked us. And
Yeah.
so it was just cool, because then you learn, when she's due and all this stuff. And it was 10 weeks after my
Yeah.
sister was going to have her baby. So suddenly, this dream of like starting our extended family and kids and cousins was, going to come true. But it was very interesting how we were in the waiting room with her. My family was there.
A due date with everybody there already.
Yes.
Thinking about babies and the future and grandkids.
Yes. But the thing about adoption that I think kind of gets misrepresented, especially in the church, is that, a lot of times people in the church are one-sided with it in the sense of like, okay, you're going to provide a house and a life for this baby that, maybe didn't have that option or that opportunity. But what people don't realize is that there is like a woman on the other side who is going through a lot, who is at a crossroads. And one of the things that God really pressed on us was to care for her.
Yeah, well, pressed on you.
Yeah.
Which I came just as oblivious as most people are.
And she might be listening. I know she listens to this podcast. So, hey, girl.
Us feel like we're like the hero and painting this beautiful picture. And then you really were one that opened my eyes to there is more. You can't say you're for life and take one life and not be for the other life,
Yes.
And I remember me almost wanting to not buck that, but me once again just thinking about the path of least resistance because it meant us signing up for an adoption consultant, which is like another $4,000 or $5,000 on top of the other thousands of dollars. I don't know how God's going to give us.
Yes.
But I remember you sharing how important that was for you, for us to, that we're not the hero. She's the hero that is. Honestly, you think about the story of God. I'm sorry, I'm a little ADHD, but him giving up his son for the greater good of others, and for the greater good of humanity, and this is a birth mom who...
Yeah, but people find themselves in tough places all the time. And so the level of courage it takes to say, I'm not in a good place, like I need to make this decision, I think completely goes under the radar.
No, for sure.
Like, a lot of times we want to clap for the adoptive parent who, adopts the baby and all this stuff. But for us, we were so broken, that we had been called to do this. And yet what it did to us was allowed us to witness her journey.
Yeah.
And so we came to this place where we were like, if we care about our son, like we care about her.
Yeah.
It's like those are not separate. And so I think watching God move on our hearts in that was probably one of the greatest journeys I've ever been on. It was one of the most challenging. But we knew we need to have an open adoption. We knew, we want our son to be connected to her.
Yeah.
If she would allow. I remember thinking, I want him to know his biology. I want him to know where he comes from. And I remember thinking, if that is going to happen, then I need to make sure as his mom that I'm doing everything that I can to bridge the gap between his biology and us.
To try to eliminate as many questions
I wanted all
can.
the awkwardness, and so what we embarked on was an open relationship, and what we did not realize is that it would be, like, we love them so much.
Oh, we would have never imagined that it'd become what it is now.
Yes.
It is literally our
extended family. Yeah.
But I think about even, from that moment of being in that, and this is the way that, from the moment of being in that waiting room with Emily and then us getting our match, and I remember even thinking about finding out, he was going to be born in Arizona. The baby's coming from Arizona, right outside of Scottsdale. And I think it was the next day that Pastor Craig called me, and he was basically letting me know, hey, we moved to Scottsdale, Arizona. And I'm like, whoa, that's crazy. We just matched with a family from Scottsdale, Arizona.
And
He
we
was
need a
in
place to
town,
stay.
And we're going to need a place to stay, you know?
It was literally like the safari. There were so many moments along the way where we
It's
knew
just
that God,
confirmation.
yes.
Yeah, and it was such a journey. And then not even from there, I remember, I may be skipping ahead too much, but I remember when we first went out to Arizona to meet her and to get to know her a little bit before everything happened. We wanted to make sure she felt comfortable. We felt comfortable with her. And I remember her saying, hey, will you guys meet me at the zoo?
No, she said, there's this safari park.
All right, that's what it was. I knew
Yeah,
that was,
and I was like,
I didn't know if she knew it was a zoo, and then we found out it was a
no.
safari park.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
You can correct us, girl. But I remember being like, a safari park? Yeah, well, yeah, we can meet you there.
Yeah. And it all started, just to remind you guys, with that little boy named Safari that we got to pray over is when God spoke to us.
We kept seeing these, like, things that reminded us
And
of.
then we went to go eat at this Mexican restaurant after, and it's like safari themed,
It
which
was a
didn't even make
Mexican
sense.
restaurant with like zebras and,
And cheetahs
giraffes.
and lions. It's like, doesn't even make sense, you know?
Yeah.
But it was just such a significant confirmation of God.
But I
which-
think it's amazing and so simple how God reminded us that we were where we're supposed to
Yeah.
be. You know, so often I
Yeah.
feel like we look for these like massive epiphanies from God. And really, God speaks a lot softer than that. You know,
Yeah.
God nudges and pushes, and it's never aggressive.
Yeah.
You know, it's
you gotta
just
be
subtle.
looking for it. Being almost a student of, not just a student of life, but a student of God.
But we relied on those because we
Yeah.
were like, okay, we're in the right.
Was terrifying.
Yeah.
Am I choosing the right family? Am I doing the right thing? I'm about to invest my entire everything into this adoption. Is this the way? Am I going? Am I hearing you right, God?
Well, even this was our first child. Are we even ready to be parents?
Yeah.
Are we, there were so many things that we did not know. And so those little glimpses of God, nudging us, I think really gave us the energy we needed to keep going, the momentum,
Well, talking about being on a safari, if you've ever been on one, there's moments where it's not always the easiest. I remember being in Kenya and having to use the bathroom, and they put me off of you don't know where I'm going with this at all.
I know.
But they put me off of the safari bus, like behind these hyenas, and they're like, just if they look at you, you might just get a little worried. But I remember being from matching with our birth mother to, all right, we go out and meet her, and, we match. We're excited. This is really high of finally this is kind of coming to an end of that part of the journey. But I remember getting an email the next day that was like very professional. It was not, I think there may have been a congratulations, but it was like, congratulations. Now we need you to send us $30,000 within
30 days.
Yeah, 30 days, but we need like $5,000, $6,000 within 3 days. And it was like, wire us this money or you're not getting this child.
We were like, oh my gosh.
I've never heard that terminology in my life other than watching action movies where they take people ransom. It's like, wire us the money or you're not getting the kid, you know?
Yeah,
and that
well,
was when another set of reality set in and things got scary.
But again, it was like, okay, God, you have us on this journey. Like, help us. And what did we do? We took to Facebook.
We went to Facebook
And we asked many
these,
of you.
and thank you guys so much. Some of y'all that were so
we started that
locked arms
fundraiser
with us during this process from the beginning to the end.
We watched God perform a miracle right in front of our eyes.
So we had 3 to 4 days to have about $6,000, 30 days to have at least $30,000 in, and throughout the next 3 to 4 days, we had about $40,000
God just
coming
moved,
in.
yes.
Like I felt like Jeff Bezos because every time my phone would ding, somebody gave more money and somebody was behind us.
Which was extremely humbling that
was
anybody
wild.
would partake in this journey that we were on.
But it's one of those things where I just think about, when you position yourself for the need for a miracle and you get to see God's goodness in it today. Like, there's so many times even in our life right now where I'm like, God, how are you going to do this? How are we going to get these bills paid? How is this going to happen? And I can go back and recount his faithfulness then and say, all right, well, if he was faithful then, he'll be faithful now. But it was only because we allowed ourselves to be in need of him to move,
Yes.
But, man, it was just such a mind-blowing season of our life of just money coming in.
There's a bug flying. You see it?
Yeah, I saw it land on your shirt a little while ago. I just didn't want to stop
Should we
filming.
kill it?
No, we're good. Don't
Okay.
kill the bugs. We don't kill bugs. PETA may be listening. We love them. But it was just so wild. Just to think, man, God, if you want to drop another 40 grand in our hands in the next couple of days, I'm down.
No.
But so all of this money comes in, we get to pay for everything, and we get to go out there and be with them, and we got to, so many people ask us, I guess, which everybody's adoption journey is different, but they were like, hey, so how old was he when you got to know him or see him? And we got to be there the day of, and that's huge. That was such a privilege.
She was so gracious to let us, be a part of that. Even though I'm sure that was, rip your heart out.
I couldn't imagine.
There was just so many things within that. And, there's so many things in general about adoption that you don't know until you get there. And I think that's where, having faith and being able to talk to God and ask God, what do I do in this moment right here, is so important, because there were so many moments where we didn't know what to do. And I did not ever want us to be selfish. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
you're better than than I am.
Yeah, that was so important to me. It was like, this is not about us.
Yeah.
What people don't realize is that when a woman is giving birth, even if she has picked a family for adoption, that child is hers. That child is not our child.
By any means.
By any means.
Doesn't matter how much money or
and
whatever
I'm passionate about that, because it's like, we could not bust up into that hospital room and act like that child was ours.
Yeah.
That child was not ours.
Yeah.
And so I think so often, people get hurt in the adoption world because their expectations are in the wrong place. We have to be cautious of every journey, and it's like the authority in the room. Like, we did not have authority in the room. And so everything was her decision. And so I'm passionate about that. I wish more people talked about this, because I've seen so many adoptive families go into that hospital room and try to take over, and there is nothing in writing or period that says that you are in charge of that child. And so I think about if you were in that position. That's hard.
Yeah.
And so
every moment that we were able to be there was a gift given to us by her. By her selflessness, her generosity. That would allow us to be there.
Yes.
And allow us to...
But God had to bring us to that place. It wasn't like we were like, this is,
I remember plenty of moments.
We got into it.
She made us sweat for a little while.
She did.
I said that because I want her to hear it. No, I'm just messing with you. We got love for you. But it was just such a journey. And just think about all that we've been given out of that now. Relationship with her and her family and her parents, and these are people that we wouldn't trade for the world.
Wouldn't trade for the world. And then
of course Elijah Zeal, just who he is.
Yes. And I think what's so amazing about him is he looks like the spitting image of her. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
People think that we look alike, and wait till he's in like 4th grade when he's probably about 1.5 feet taller than I am.
Yes.
Because his birth mother's 6 foot tall.
6 foot tall.
And he's carrying me up to kids' church, and then people will no longer think that he looks like me.
But I love that we get the opportunity to see him for who he really is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like we're not going to look past his biology and pretend like, you know, his whole life is all nurture because of us.
Yeah,
you know, there are
sure.
things about him that only come from her, and we glorify those things.
Mm-hmm.
We appreciate those things. You know, she is a part of our family.
Yeah.
And so I think walking through that process has really opened up our hearts to loving people, you know, in such a genuine way.
Yeah. More people to love him.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying every case is like that. I understand there has to be boundaries in some cases where things may not be healthy and whatnot, but we've been blessed with such an amazing family and such
And it
an
hasn't,
amazing
I mean, we've had
opportunity.
to push past, like, we've had to overcome things together. You know, it's like a relationship that was founded on kind of uncomfortable terms. You know, we've had to really work on that. And so I love what God has done. I love where we're at with her. I love that we're all a part of each other's lives.
Do you remember staying, I guess it was probably 3 or 4 days in that he was born, and we were staying in a friend's house in their spare bedroom next to his elderly father, sharing a bathroom with him. And oh my gosh, like parenthood hit us in the face. Like, I love the Mike Tyson quote that said, everybody has a plan till you get punched in the face. We had a plan of being parents until we got punched in the face. We're in this room changing diapers up all night long. I went to change my first diaper, and I don't even know what you call that, his belly button, his umbilical cord falls off, and I thought I just killed my first child. I'm like, what happened? It was just so much.
But, you know, that was not your typical firstborn becoming parents moment, but that's what was our
no changing table. We were changing them on the carpet. You got to get up in the middle of the night and get on the floor and change him. Oh, not sleeping at all. It was wild.
But it was sweet times. And so, you know, we adopted Elijah, and that was we saw God move, and we still see God move through that. And then, you know, we started, you know, after Elijah, we started getting curious, like, okay, you know, is there something we can do on our end, you know, maybe with doctors or whatever to figure out this infertility thing.
And then once again, so many people put their foot in their mouths when they come along and they say things like they never mean ill, but they say things like, oh, people always, you know, after they adopt their first one, then they get pregnant right after.
People say that all the time.
And it's like, we didn't adopt to get pregnant after. We adopted because God called us to adopt. But then, why are you putting this pressure on us, man?
I know, it's like, God, what if it doesn't work that way?
It's like starting all over again. When are y'all going to have a baby, you know?
And I think, I really do think that it's a lack of awareness. Like, people like us are not vocalizing how hard that is enough to where people generally just don't understand that that's maybe not the best thing to say. But I think, you know, we just have that journey where it's been unpredictable. So we start going to doctors. We go see a fertility specialist. And
we actually started trying to.
We started trying, looking at dates, but we're not organized. Yeah. So we're not like, you know, the easiest people to, you know, fit actually to a calendar.
Try.
And, so there was also this side where I was like, well, maybe if we actually tried. But then we go see this fertility specialist, and he very directly looks me dead in the eye, and he says, yes, you have unexplained infertility. And I remember being like,
such a sobering moment.
Unexplained infertility. So you're saying I am infertile and you don't know why.
Yeah.
And I remember being like, that was a very, like you said, sobering moment for me, because I remember being like, well, if you don't know why, then what, like, I just remember being speechless.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't know why we're infertile, what does that mean for us?
Yeah.
You
And I
know?
remember not knowing how to be there for you in that moment.
Well, because as a woman, you know, not to get, you know, whatever, but every single month,
Yeah.
you're
It's a
reminded that you're
reminder.
infertile.
Yeah.
You know, and that is a very devastating reality
Yeah.
every month. And so now you're at a table with a specialist who is brilliant. Like, you could tell he knows what he's talking about. And he says, yeah, you're like, there's no reason why.
Yeah.
And so I'll never forget just how painful that was.
Yeah.
You know?
And the months that ensued of constantly, are we going to be pregnant? Is this going to be
Yes.
the month? And, you know, we try to do all the things and, you know, do all the things. And
Why are you making this weird?
but we were like, but seriously though, I could never imagine what it means to be a woman in those shoes. But even, you know, watching you go through that monthly reminder of almost like, up, you failed again, up, not good enough again, up, not this time.
Yeah, you take that on like it's your fault. You know, it's like, what can I do differently? Like, is there a supplement I can take? Is there, you know, medication that I can take? Is there, you know, you start to dissect every element of your fertility. And then yet also there's this hopeless feeling of, but there is no answer.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Yeah.
the terminology was unexplained infertility. And so it really cornered it cornered us to this place where it was like, if we're gonna, like, give birth to a child, it's gonna have to be on God.
Yeah.
And so I remember coming to terms with the fact, like, okay, we need to go with this fertility specialist because we need all the knowledge we can get. Like, that was different than previous seasons, because before I think I was just in denial. Like, maybe
Yeah.
if I don't acknowledge that something might be wrong with me, maybe nothing is wrong with me.
And I think even, you know, we were talking about this last night, how, you know, you coming to terms with that. And there's always still been a part of me refusing to come to terms with that. And I think it's just religion or bad theology of, you know, as long as I declare it and speak it that it isn't, then it isn't, you know. And it's like, you know, I feel like, you know, we've got to, it's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to admit hardness in life or struggles or something might not be right, because that's when God can show that it's God and it's not you.
Yes.
You know, I think about like the goodness of God, not that any man should boast, the grace of God, not that any man should boast. And it isn't by our boasting and our declaring and our believing that no matter what things look like, that, you know, we're not infertile, no matter what any man says. All that sounds good in faith. But it wasn't really until he came to terms of, okay, there is something that is not right. This is not easy. And we need you to move, God.
I think for me, it was fear. It was like fear of being inadequate, fear
Yeah.
of being a failure, fear of having something wrong and not knowing how to fix it. You know, all of those things I think were very hard for me to overcome. But I just remember there was that moment where it was like, let's go see a specialist. And when we sat across from him, he was so brilliant, the way that he talked to us. I remember being like, okay, like he knows what he's talking about. And so it went from not addressing it to being in this fertility doctor's office and letting him take us on the journey according to his medical profession. And, you know, we did all these different steps. And so that was interesting, because then, you know, now you're like, okay, we now have a diagnosis, and now we're having to like do these steps that we've never had to take before. And there was just so much that felt unsettled during that season, but there was still peace. We knew God had us there.
Yeah.
And so I remember it was another expensive journey. Remember that we get there and we're like, man, I don't know what's more expensive, adopting or fertility.
Insurance doesn't cover anything. They start giving you these different routes. And the whole time, the question in the back of your mind, and while they're talking about these different routes, you're like, how much is this going to cost?
Yeah. You're like, I remember us getting to the place where we were like, well, I guess us growing our family is just always going to cost a lot of money.
It's always going to be expensive.
But I look back on that season of life, and my faith was tested. But what ultimately ended up happening was incredible.
Yeah.
So like we're gearing up to do an IUI, which is a procedure. That was the next step that he recommended for us. And so,
which I think it was like basically, and you may be about to say this, but they basically told us, hey, if you don't get pregnant by this next cycle or this Friday. I remember there being a Friday and a Thursday.
No, they said we are about to start the IUI process. And so they were waiting on me to start my cycle so that we could start the IUI process. And so they were like, call us whenever day one comes, and we're gonna like do blood work, we're gonna do all this stuff, and we're gonna run some tests. And we were gearing up to participate in the IUI process, and it never came, and all of a sudden I was pregnant. Like it was like, okay, what just happened? Like I called them and I was like, I know you're waiting on me to say that I'm starting my cycle, but I'm calling to tell you that I'm pregnant. And then it was like, oh my gosh, like this is such an interesting scenario. Yeah, that was the very first time that I got a positive pregnancy test. Like I remember, I don't know how many hundreds, if not thousands of pregnancy tests I took prior to that moment, but I remember being like, this was not the plan. Like the plan was we were going to start the IUI.
Finally like been okay with it.
I finally came to terms with it. We were going to do this. This is how it was going to happen. And then it was like, oh wait, tricked ya. Like you're pregnant. And then it was like, what on earth? You know, then it became this feeling of like, okay, now we got to make sure that the pregnancy is gonna sustain itself. And so, you know, that was a journey, just doing all the tests, and come to find out we were pregnant with Selah Joy. Yeah. And we had a great pregnancy.
Even the anatomy scans, and it was just so much.
Crippling. You're scared to death.
Yeah. If one thing, they're like, they crack the jokes. They're like, yeah, this is the scan to make sure that they got 10 fingers and 10 toes. And you're like, what? There's a chance that they won't.
We were there was that was a beautiful season of God just showing up in a cool way.
I think about the fact that like pregnancy test after pregnancy test, and here we are, like it's not easy. You know, we're trusting God, hoping He comes through. And just the unexpectedness, because it wasn't like we're going to get it this time. It was more so like we finally laid it down.
Finally.
And been like, we're probably going to do the IUI thing. It's going to cost a lot of money. Don't know how we're going to pay for it. And then it was like, bam. It only takes one pregnancy test. So like, it only takes one moment with God that, you know, I think about so many people get discouraged, and we do too. And it's like, oh, I need to find a job. You only need one job. You know, you only need one thing to go right, you know, and it can turn everything around.
Yes, but see, you know, not to fast forward, but we had a great pregnancy. You know, she had some complications at birth. We ended up having to do a C-section. She ended up in the NICU. Gosh, I could talk about that. Maybe that'll be its own episode.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's not the end of our parenting journey.
No,
you know?
But can we talk about our one thing we didn't talk about with Elijah was the day before Elijah was supposed to be born. We got a little antsy, we got a little anxious. You know, I was about to be a dad, you were about to be a mom for the first time, and we're like, we got to get out of this house and go do something. So we decided to go up to the Grand Canyon. And on our way to see the Grand Canyon,
we saw snow.
And then I saw a sign that said snowboarding.
Which you had never done.
Which I'd never done. Bucket list. You know, those that know me know I grew up skateboarding. Kind of at one point thought I was going to do that for a living. I guess that goes along with CrossFit, like we talked about.
I was about to say.
But man, we go out to this snowboarding place and we spend our whole life savings on renting gear and getting ski passes and all that. And we head over to the bunny slopes, which is a lie from the pit of hell. And we start down this bunny slope, man, and I'd never seen snow. I'd never snowboarded, never been on it, don't know. But it was 0 to 60, like really quick.
You just went straight on down.
And man, end up falling, snap, crackle, pop. And I remember Allison falling on her tush next to me. That's how angelic you fell. And you're like smiling at me. I don't even use the word tush, but that's how soft it was. And you're smiling at me, and I'm smiling at you, and I'm like, we gotta go.
No, you weren't smiling. You were like this.
We're like, we gotta go to the hospital, man.
And I was like, really? It's like our first trip down the bunny slope.
The day before Elijah was supposed to be born, and I feel this bone sticking out of my shoulder. I can't move. And remember, they got you to go get the car. They had me they pulled me back with a, whatever you call those, ski tractors, not ski tractors. A snowmobile. On like a gurney or whatever. And then I'm waiting for my wife to come bring the car because they're like, hey, the hospital's right at the bottom of the mountain. And I'm like, oh, she can drive. Let's go get the car. And I'm sitting in here waiting, and I'm waiting. And I'm waiting, and then finally some guy shows up, and I'm like, where is my wife at? Bone sticking out of my shoulder. I need to go to the hospital. And they're like, oh, well, she was feeling a little faint, so she sat down and got some water and some almonds. I'm like, what? Call the ambulance.
I do not do well with seeing other people be injured. I thought I was going to pass out. The guy was like, are you going to make it? Like, what do we need to do? Like, I thought he was going to have to get me on a gurney. But he gave me some almonds, and I sat there. Next thing we know, they're like, we cannot wait for her. The ambulance, we got to have the ambulance. And
I end up with this separated shoulder. And then by the grace of God, Elijah was born 10 days later, so that I could at least recover a little bit.
You had 10 days of recovery under your belt. And then a similar situation happened the week before Selah was born.
Yeah, so the week before Selah was born, I had put it off for a long time, trying to fight not having to have surgery. But I ended up having a microdiscectomy. I'd blown out a disc in 2 different places. Swinging a 100-pound kettlebell. And I think we talked about that on here before.
But it's like but before we had both children, you get injured.
And what do you think is going to happen child 3?
I don't know. I'm like, are we even going to have a 3rd child? Because gosh, I don't know what's going to happen to you.
Don't speak that.
No, I
didn't have one right now.
I didn't mean it like that. Yeah. But it's so interesting. It's like, okay, so we felt called to adopt. We struggled with infertility. We gave birth to Selah. And then, that's not where our parenting journey has ended. Not long ago, we encountered miscarriage. And so now I feel like God's just giving us all of these experiences that we never had in order to relate with people, I guess.
Yeah.
But, so when was that? Last winter.
Christmas. It was a Christmas Day or somewhere around. It was some kind of significant day.
We were so excited.
That you had taken a pregnancy
It was
test.
positive.
Yeah.
No, but I ended, and I'm going to share more in depth on the next episode. We're going to actually have like an episode about pregnancy loss and miscarriage with some friends of mine. It's going to be there. Yeah, you won't be there. So I'll wait to share those details. But again, it's just been this roller coaster of a journey where it's like you have to hold on to God no matter what.
Yeah.
In the highs, in the lows. Like I have learned that God is our anchor.
Yeah.
And,
sure.
Whenever life is inconsistent and things are not constant and it's unpredictable, He is predictable. And so I think with our parenting journey, no matter if we were adopting, no matter if we were infertile and trying to understand and had a diagnosis of unexplained infertility, or no matter if, we were excited about being pregnant and then miscarried, the same thing is true across the board, that we had to hold on to God.
Yeah. And I just remember, and I don't know how much you want to get into that. I remember that moment that it was the first, I don't know, it was the first appointment that I didn't go to you with.
Yes.
Go with you to. Go to you with. Go with you to.
Yeah, it was a very routine appointment. It was not.
Wasn't the anatomy
It was
scan,
not an ultrasound.
It wasn't one of the big ones.
I was 11 weeks pregnant.
And I just remember you calling me and letting me know. I remember you maybe sent a text or two, and I don't know who called who, but I remember just breaking.
We FaceTimed
on the phone. Yeah, FaceTime.
Which we had never done that before.
No.
That was like that was a moment in our marriage that marked me.
But I remember I think of it now, I don't remember it then, but us being so broken together, honestly, was for me, and maybe it's just because I finally, which I never not wanted to let my guard down, but my guard had come completely down, and maybe that's why, but I felt like it was so unifying for us.
Well, because it's like we answered, and we're on FaceTime. I'm in the parking lot.
I cry just thinking about it.
I'm in the parking lot of the hospital.
I'm in the parking lot of Alexander's, right around the corner from the church.
It's like I'm informing you that, the baby didn't make it, and I was 11 weeks pregnant. And I remember just looking at you on FaceTime, and we just wept.
Yeah.
And as awful as that situation is and was, we had never had a moment where we shared in grief together. And I think that deepened our relationship, It was like, I think for so long we struggled with each other and arguing and all the things, but this was the first thing that this was the first adversity. Yes, it was us versus this.
Yeah.
And so, we entered into a new level of, intimacy and depth because of the tragedy that we experienced. But again, I wouldn't trade that, and it's hard to say that, but I wouldn't trade the journey for anything.
I remember just the feeling of the duality of emotions, and I think I even have a note. I meant to look for it this morning before we did this, but I remember the duality of emotions of intense grief, yet still having the ability to intensely praise God for His goodness and His faithfulness. And it those are just two things that you don't think coincide or coexist.
But they do.
Yeah, but they do. And it was
it's this ability that God has, and only God.
Yeah.
Literally, like, there's nothing in the world other than Him that can provide that level of peace in the midst of such a horrific and utter devastating event. You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing else that could have met us right there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's because of the journey of God. I don't think God doesn't expect you to blindly come out and just trust Him with all your crap, like all this crap that you go through in life. He wants to build trust. He wants you to walk with Him the same way over the years that we have learned to build trust by going through adversity and going through hard seasons. But I think it was a season where, truly we got to feel what it means to have the word tattooed on your heart of, I will make all things work out together for your good, or you can remain confident that I will bring to completion the good work. No matter what it feels like in your flesh, or no matter what it looks like, it was like we were able to still lay our head not on our situation, our circumstance, but on the faithfulness of God that we've seen in our past.
Yes.
And knowing that it's not going to be the end of our story.
Yes.
That there
well,
was
it's
still
like
hope.
we've seen, I feel like God has taken us on this journey of like overcoming odds to get to a result. It's like with adoption, there were so many hoops we had to jump through, and there's so many tests along the way. And with infertility, literally, there's so many tests. And am I gonna be, fertile or not? Am I gonna, are the numbers gonna double or not? Or there were so many like tests. And I think what I've learned is that in life, there are so many tests that God allows us to participate in, where we get to learn that He's really the only rock that holds us at the bottom,
I think even with my depression deal last year, it was like, if you don't quit, you win. Like if you just, so like even if you're just going through a hard time, you find yourself in a season that you don't know how you're going to make it through, you just don't give up. Just keep pushing, and He wants to build trust and show you how He's going to come through.
But I think it's so amazing that, unlike the other, means of finding peace in the world, whether that's like, I got a horoscope, or all of those different things. Jesus is a person that wants to be in relationship with us. And so, that's, all religious and Christian-y and whatever. But what practically that does for me is it says, when I am in the valley of the shadow of death, you're there with me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not alone there. Like, when I feel like nobody understands, when I'm taking yet another pregnancy test and it's negative, like, you're right there with me in that.
Yeah.
Whenever I don't know how to have an open adoption, you're right there. Whenever I don't know what to say to his birth mom, because I don't know what that's like to be in her shoes, but I want to have the right compassion level and empathy. Like, you're right there.
Yeah.
And so I think in life, with our path to parenting, we have learned how to cling to Jesus. Because really, that's the only way to make it to the other side.
Yeah, it makes me think of this thing I ripped off of Robert Madu. I actually preached it one time, where he said, if I end up in jail, don't give me a book on law, give me a lawyer. If I find myself sick, don't come bring me a book on health, get me a doctor. I think about the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. He's not just a way out, but He's somebody with you in it, and that's going to carry you through
It's
it.
ultimately the greatest promise to ever be.
Yeah.
I'm so thankful. Wow, what an episode.
Man, we ended this thing, huh?
I guess so. Well, anything else? Got anything?
No,
Got anything?
Man, it's just opening up these cans.
I know.
I feel like I'm in like emotional.
I feel like we unzipped our hearts, and now we're like, okay, well, see you later.
There's a lot of ups and downs.
Yeah, but and look, our heart in this is, if you have any similar situation, or you know somebody that does, like, we just want to add value. We want to encourage.
We want to come along the journey with you in any way we can. Whether even that's, just by you listening to this podcast, or you reaching out. And, I know we never really talked about this, but man, if you're walking through something similar, we would love to know. We would love to walk alongside.
Message
you, pray
us.
for you, message us, talk to us. We love to pray for you, pray with you, believe with you, help you find whatever wisdom we have. We've just done things wrong a lot of times. I think that's what kind of wisdom is. But we will give it to you, or maybe you've thought about adoption. One of my things I'm very passionate about is helping walk with other families.
Because you don't know what you're doing.
It really is it's a whole culture and world that you don't know about until you get into it.
And if you're struggling with infertility, like, we want to believe with you as if it were us, because that is how we made it. Like, there were people that held up our arms when we couldn't, and so our part of our heart is to believe with those that are dealing with infertility, that God would make them fertile.
Or if you've got a ski or snowboarding trip coming up, I'd love to try again. Maybe it'll be our third child, third Pamelia coming along.
Yeah, be praying. Who knows when that one will come, if, when.
I'm ready when you
whatever.
are.
Oh, gosh. Okay. Well, like we always say on this podcast, life can be tough, but God is still so good.